Hello, I'm Bernard Hickey from interest.co.nz, and here we have Tom Peters. Welcome, Tom, to Auckland and New Zealand, where you've been speaking on behalf of the Food and Grocery Council. But it turns out you're also a resident of New Zealand, or at least for part of the year, in Golden Bay. Tom is obviously the author of In Search of Excellence, many would say the seminal business strategy book of the last 20 or 30 years, and the author of a new book, Little Big Things.
Right, correct.
Tell us what you were trying to say in that book. What's the central message there?
Well, the central message is there are no great secrets to success, I think, in life and business or what have you. And the whole idea of the little big things, we start off with a quote from an American statesman back in the mid-1750s, and it's something like, it is the small courtesies that are remembered more or less forever. And you know, when one's running a business, whether it has 10,000 employees or 10 employees, it's the little acts of thoughtfulness, it's saying thank you, it's being on time when you tell somebody that, you know, if you're a one-person plumber or electrician and you say you'll be there at 10 o'clock, being there at 9:58 separates you more, frankly, from your peers sometimes than being a better electrician. So it's all about the small touches that rule our lives generically as human beings. And you know, one of the things I've long believed is that, you know, business behavior is human behavior, as stupidly obvious as that sounds. But in a lot of our professional teaching in our business schools, we treat it as if it was some mathematical puzzle, as opposed to, you know, fundamentally about the way people behave in interaction with one another.
It seems almost obvious to say, but why do you think these little big things have been forgotten in big corporate life?
Well, I think big institutions, not exactly a dramatic finding. Big institutions become rule-driven, become bureaucratic, reduce the value of the human being de facto, and you know, become distant from their marketplaces and so on. I don't, you know, obviously when we look back at these last strange years, there is malice and people who are in jail and people who ought to be in jail and so on, but fundamentally that's not what gets us in trouble. It's that, what was it, the philosopher Hannah Arendt, who talked about the banality of evil, and I'm not going to, you know, at all equate the Holocaust with a financial meltdown, but it is the banality of bureaucracy, I suppose.
Do you think then big companies can retain their humanness in a way?
When we wrote the first book, In Search of Excellence, the idea was that some do. I'm not sure they can over the long haul. I don't deny, I mean, I happen to be a champion of middle-sized businesses and smaller businesses, but I will be the first to acknowledge that the vital economy has all three, the, you know, vital small business sector, vital medium-sized business sector, and also some flag carriers who you know, I think are terribly important as well. But the answer is, in terms of long-term vitality and innovativeness, whatever the longest shot is at the horse track, it's even longer for a big company. You're big company.
That's right. You're a close analyzer of corporate culture, and the Occupy movement has been a critic of, in many ways, of corporate culture, of globalized corporate culture in the last few years. What do you think of those criticisms?
I think that any number of forces are coming together that would take us from now until well into the middle of the night to talk about. And a lot of it has been sheer coincidence. Going back presumably to the first tractor, or maybe even the first hand plow, we've been automating things for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And now we've gotten to the point with the new software, the intelligent software and so on, where we are automating the $200,000 a year financial analyst jobs. And so all of us are under attack, if you will, in terms of what we do for a living. Now that happens to, you know, coincide with obviously technology such as the internet that allow instantaneous communication. So I think it's less the evils of some horrid thing called globalization than it is a series of forces, including primarily technological forces, that are changing the way people live, work, act, do business, and so on, such as this conversation.
That's right. And those forces of globalization must make it harder, though, for big companies to focus on those little big things if they're having to focus on little big things across multiple borders and time zones and different technologies.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is, here you and I are sitting having a discussion which, as far as I know, the numbers in your world, hundreds of thousands of people are going to participate in it or view it in a regular basis. And that used to be the unique bailiwick of a small number of giant media companies. So yes, it's increasingly difficult for the big guys to hold on to the kinds of advantages they have in the past.
If you are advising a big company, or if you've got big companies listening in, what messages, what lessons could they learn to retain that nimbleness, that humanness that perhaps is easier for a small company?
The reality statistically, and this is true for me when I give a speech, and for you even with your sizable numbers, is the person who is primarily listening to you is not the chief executive officer of a $50 billion company. And the person in a big business who is watching us is more likely the chief executive of a 7-person training department or a 14-person sub-department in a finance department of a division of a big company. And so my hypothesis is make it work in your little piece of the turf. I'm totally willing to acknowledge there are people at the top of the organization who are attempting to set strategy, and that's a different conversation. All I've got is today, all I've got is my 7 people in the training department or what have you, and turn it into a gem and turn it into a work of art. Make it a place where literally all 7 or 17 of those people are growing or learning. I mean, the only way you defend yourself against the new global economy, if you will, is to learn something new every day and have at it, and that's always within our control, either as an individual or with a group of 6, 16, or what have you. So forget about it. There's an old Mother Teresa line about which I will get entirely wrong, about we dream of doing great things, but if we can do tiny things with great compassion, we've had a good life.
You mentioned in your presentation to the Food and Grocery Council that one of the things to focus on is to look after your sergeants, which is something you sort of point to there in the small groups. Can you talk a bit about that?
Well, there's a little line I use on a PowerPoint slide that says, if you're the regimental commander and if all of your lieutenants and captains and majors and lieutenant colonels are killed, that's a tragedy. If all your sergeants are killed, it's a catastrophe. Because the reality is the work, back to the prior question, the work gets done in these units of 4 or 5 or 6 or 12 or 15 or 18, as the Army calls it, a squad. And so the leader at that first level is actually, in many respects, the most important leadership position in an organization of either 6 or 66,000, or if you're talking about the United States or China, militaries with a couple of million people. But it's so irritating to me because we pay so darn much attention to the middle managers and the senior managers, and we don't. The general or the admiral spends their time worrying about sergeants and chief petty officers. The CEO of the big company seldom pays a heck of a lot of attention to that first line supervisor, and yet he or she is just as dependent as that general or admiral is.
Tom Peters, the author of Little Big Things there. I'm Bernard Hickey for interest.co.nz.